Hello and welcome to the Outlaws podcast with Kate and Shayla for professionals unlearning the rules of work and life. Ditch the shoulds and build what fits. Today we're talking about AI, access to justice and bravery with someone who stepped right out of the traditional legal funnel and built something very different. Our guest is Sam Flynn, former lawyer and co-founder of Josef, an AI automation platform used by legal teams around the world, from Bumble and L'Oreal to community legal centres and universities.
We talk about what it looks like to use technology to actually close and not widen the justice gap. We also go deep on the human side. Sam talks about unlearning the lawyer obsession with risk, separating mistakes from failure, dealing with being laughed at by the respectable, air quotes, end of town, and choosing to do it anyway. If you've ever felt stuck in a traditional path or wondered what else you can do with a law degree, this conversation will give you a very real, very practical look at another way to build a career and a life that you actually love. Sam Flynn, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the Outlaws podcast today. Sam, for those who don't yet know about Josef, can you explain about your company, what it is and what they do? What you do?
Sure. Yes. Thanks for having me, Kate and Shayla. It's very exciting to be here. This is a topic that's very close to my heart. The whole idea of outlaws. Thank you for making this. I wish I'd had it when I was a junior lawyer. So Josef is my company. We founded it in Australia in 2019. I now live in New York, where I lead North America and European operations. It's been quite a journey between those 2 points. At base, what Josef is it's an AI automation platform. We were doing AI before it was cool. And it is used by legal teams around the world, legal compliance, some others, to automate their work. So that work falls into 3 categories. So it's answering questions, generating documents like contracts, or triggering workflows. So getting instructions on a new matter is a classic example of a workflow. We primarily work with in-house legal departments. That has been a journey, figuring out exactly where we fit, but that's our primary market right now. So some examples are we work with Bumble, the dating app.
Okay, wow.
Their global privacy team uses us to automate data protection impact assessments. We work with L'Oreal. They have automated a whole suite of contracts in their legal and people team, so the business can come and generate those contracts themselves without having to go through the lawyer. We work with Bupa. So they've built Q&A tools so the marketing team can get answers to legal questions automatically. And it's like very complex areas of the law, highly regulated, and they have what's called a legal front door. So instead of calling a lawyer up at 5 p.m. on a Friday, you submit a request through their intake system to streamline that process and get you help faster. So those are some like classic applications of the technology. And this is really important to the story, where we first started, and Kate, this is how we met, is we started as 3 founders, 3 friends who were building tools for legal aid organizations, and we still do that, and it still sits at the core of what we do. So we work with amazing organizations including in WA. CLWA is one of our customers and has built a number of tools on the platform. We've built tenancy tools with NYU here in New York. We're working with the University of Michigan. I presented at Stanford 2 weeks ago on a project we're doing in Alaska. So these are all designed to help bridge what we call the access to justice gap through the use of automation technologies of the kind I just described. So those are kind of the 2 poles of the work that we're doing. There's so much going on in this space at the moment. I'm sure lots of people listening will be hearing about Harvey and co-counsel and co-pilot and all these sorts of things. Where Josef really sits in the mix is that obsessive focus on self-service. And that comes from this deep belief that so much of what we do as lawyers can be done with supervision and guidance by the people we're trying to help. The person can generate the NDA. The person can get the answer to the compliance question and then go about their day and unblock them. But we also believe that the lawyer or the expert needs to stay in the driver's seat. And that is also a critical part of our technology. And Kate, you saw this when we worked with UWA.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've tried to make this technology super accessible for even technophobes, which many lawyers are, because it's really important that they understand the logic that's going into the outputs. They can validate it all because law is complex and hard.
Yeah.
That's Josef.
And it is incredibly user-friendly as a Gen X and a natural technophobe. It was a beautiful system to use. So we, and Charlie, this is how we met actually, I think the first time as well.
Yeah.
Because you were one of our clients. So working with students to create, as a unit at UWA, we worked with Josef and not-for-profits, and we created student teams, created apps, or, it was app is really how I would describe it. But to automate some of the processes, either external facing or internal facing. And it was the most beautiful system to use. But it also gave me a real appreciation for how I think about law too, that kind of, that way you almost like retrofit. You start with what you want to get to, and you build, you retrofit it out. It was a really interesting way to see law actually as well. But no, it's a fabulous system. And then it's just amazing to see how Josef has grown over that relatively short period of time. But,
Tell me about the process there, Sam. So you studied law, you worked as a lawyer for a bit. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So studied law, I did the traditional path. Okay, here we're getting into outlaws territory. So I studied law. I fell in love with the law. I loved the law.
Just to backtrack, what made you decide to do law? Is there a family background, or is there just something about it that drew you to it?
I do have some uncles, but I got a very large family, so that's just statistically going to happen. But a good Irish Catholic family. I was 16. I loved humanities. I loved arguing. I loved, bringing together ideas, and law was at the top of the list, and I put it there. So not a good reason, right?
Well, at 16, it's as good a reason as any, right? But
literally, I didn't know how to put my shoes on, let alone how to pick a career. But I started law, and I slowly fell in love. And I fell in love with, and looking back right now, I'm ostensibly like a business person. We do a lot of research, but I run a business. And looking back, I think how lucky lawyers are in a lot of ways. It is such a privilege in today's society to be able to sit and consider and think. And to have that space. And I think that that's such a special thing. I became a black letter lawyer. I was a litigation attorney. The Americanism's creeping in. Litigation lawyer at Arnold Block Liebler in Melbourne for a number of years, which was like an extraordinary place to train.
So, tell us about, so you started as a lawyer. How did Josef come about?
I worked in litigation. I loved it a lot. And I went to ABL. I don't know if people are familiar with the firm. It's like probably bigger in Melbourne and Sydney, but it's incredibly rigorous. Like the training was really rigorous, and it was a tough place to cut one's teeth. But I chose it for that reason. And that's something I've always done in my life, is like gone for the harder thing, gone for the bigger thing, shot for the stars. Sometimes I think that's good. Sometimes I think it's not good. But that's what I did nonetheless. And from there, went to the court. So I was a clerk at the Supreme Court in Australia, and with a wonderful judge, Justice Elliott. And while I was there, I thought I wanted to become a barrister. I, again, loved working with the judge, but I started to think about, well, what else is there? What else should I be thinking about in my career? And it gave me a bit of space and time to think about that. From there, I went and did three things. I started my MFA in creative writing. I went to a new law firm called Hive Legal, which uses a lot of technology and different ways of working. And I started volunteering a lot with civil liberties organizations. And what I did there, that may or may not be interesting to people, but why I'm sharing that with you is a critical component of me jumping out of the law, out of this kind of very institutionalized career. And that's how I thought about it. I went from primary school to secondary school, to the right university, to the right law firm, to the court. I was on a path. And then what I did to get out of it is I said, okay, well, what are other things I like? And how can I build space and time to just try my hand at those things? And those are the three things I chose: practicing law in a different way, creative writing, and civil liberties work, like human rights work. And very interestingly, all those things intersected to lead me to Josef today. The specific thing that I did over that period went for like 3 or 4 years of kind of like playing around, testing, failing, learning, becoming very comfortable in that uncertainty, not having a lot of money. When my husband first met me, he likes to tell this story to our friends. I had 2 single mattresses and 1 pillow on the floor of my bedroom. So it must have been love. But what I did with the civil liberties organization is we were dealing with this like fines issue. Infringements are such a big like human rights issue that people don't realize for people who are on the fringes. And we built we were working with a barrister and trying to help people who were dealing with this new infringement system. And we realized, okay, this is great. We're helping one person today and one person tomorrow. What if we could scale this? What if we could completely change the way that we are interacting with people? And we built a tool. We built an app. It was very simple, but if they got stuck in the system, they answered a few questions, it told them what to do. We launched that tool in 2016. We had 30,000 people use it on day one. We had 60,000 people use it by the end of the first month.
Wow.
Like we 60,000 x'd the work that we were doing, right? And I was like, whoa, that was insane. The level of demand out there is extraordinary. And the government actually ended up changing the law off the back of that project. And now we have a much fairer infringement system in Victoria today. That was my light bulb moment where I was like, okay, I mean, obviously there is still legal work that needs to be done human to human, but it's often like the very complex stuff that's at the top of the pile. There is this whole other cohort of legal issues, not just in legal aid, also in business, that doesn't need to be done in that way. That was my light bulb moment.
Wow. And so, I mean, did you ever, it sounds as though it felt pretty natural, that sort of that movement into that kind of thing. There was never a moment where you thought, I don't know, I've done all this training to be a lawyer. It was just like, no, this is the right fit.
I mean, it always sounds like that in retrospect. And I think that's the trick, right? I didn't have a plan. What I did is I knew what I liked, and then I just dabbled at those things. It was advice I got from a friend at the time, which I think comes from Elaine de Botton, who started the School of Life. And the advice was, if you're feeling a bit stuck, just dip your toe into things you like, follow your nose, buy yourself space, buy yourself time, and see where you go. And that's all I did. And then just over those 4 years, just continually pulling the strands together, and then came across this idea. And here I am, 5 years later, in New York, living a dream life.
Right. You mentioned that you did MFA in creative writing. So and you've said that that's actually was part of the thread. So I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Because that's not obvious. Do you know what I mean?
It's not as
volunteering is obvious. So I'd love you to dig a bit more into that.
So when we started Josef, we went through an incubator program in 2018 and we launched in 2019. The thing that really set us apart in the space was, yes, our vision and our technology, of course, always. But I think one of the things that really set us apart was our brand and our ability to tell stories about what we were doing.
Right. Yeah.
There are automation platforms out there, right? Like people were trying to do this work, but we weren't just trying to automate business processes. We were trying to change the way that legal work was being done. And we brought so many people with us. Like we signed up Clifford Chance and Minter Ellison in the early days. They trained hundreds and thousands of lawyers on our platform because they really bought into what we were doing. And I think such a critical component of that is the ability to tell a story. I have a unfinished manuscript that's like burning a hole in my bedroom somewhere, 40,000 words. That hasn't brought a lot of value, but that ability to tell a story is just super critical.
Right. But also too, I think there is something about the creative process as well that is just, it might not be an obvious link to what you're doing, but there's something about engaging in that kind of creative process, whether it's, painting or writing, or I do feel there is something kind of, without wanting to get too woo-woo, a little bit magical about the creative process that can unlock things in you.
I think that that's probably what law and some of these quite traditional things have been missing for such a long period of time, and I think that absolutely, Kate, it brings that magic back into it when you're able to translate what you do in a way that makes sense to people, because I think that particularly in law, there's this feeling that it's very complex and people don't understand it. And so I think, I can imagine great value in being able to storytell what it is that you're doing so that people understand it. I think that's incredible. And also, I think, Kate, we've seen this, haven't we, with so many of our guests just saying, I just kind of followed things that I was interested in, and it took me to somewhere where perhaps I wasn't expecting to go. Yeah. So lovely. Such a great story.
I love that. I think creativity is just so valuable because of what it brings to our lives anyway. But I also think it's often the magic ingredient, right? As well. And that's, it is exactly what we've found with some of our guests. But I seem to remember, but there's a literary reference, the name Josef.
There is. And I forget. Yes, it's in the name. It's The Trial by Franz Kafka. So the protagonist is Joseph K. And the lawyers won't give him access to information. They don't tell him what's going on. He's trapped in this bureaucratic mess. And there are different endings, but they're all bad. And the whole idea is here is we want to make legal work, legal knowledge more accessible for everyone because we think that's a win-win.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you come up against sort of barriers in any of this? You know, this idea that, you know, we have to have lawyers doing a lot of this grunt work and they're so important and we can't possibly having computers doing it. Like, what's been some of the things you've come up against?
Endless, Shayla.
Yeah.
Endless.
Mm.
There was always the partner sitting up the back of the room with their arms crossed, looking like this.
Yeah.
And you always know what their question is going to be. They're going to be trying to like pull it apart bit by bit. Yes, of course. And look, I've seen that move in waves. From the early days when this was quite a new concept, like building full self-service automation tools. So people were scared of even quite simple things, through to today when we have AI, which brings a whole host of opportunities, but also risks. The primary one being it's a probabilistic system in what lawyers conceive to be a deterministic environment. That's a big gap that we need to bridge absolutely and all the time. I think that is what makes lawyers lawyers. A good lawyer is someone who looks at something, they see all the risks, they can list them all, they can tell you what's going to go wrong, and they can help you plan, right? That is a skill that in some rooms you really, really want. And in other rooms, you really need them to turn it off or at least dial it down. And so much of the work that I've done, some of that has been the creative storytelling, but more of it in the product has been how do you make sure that the lawyer is still in control. That's the critical component, right? So even with AI, yes, the tool is off answering questions on its own, but we go through a rigorous process of only drawing on reputable sources, training so that they can see and test, actually validating how accurate it is. And then after that, giving their lawyers the opportunity to go through and review the answers that are coming through or edit it or do whatever, right? So they're always in the driver's seat. That's been key to unlocking that fear.
Yeah, right. And so I guess which of the habits did you have to unlearn from your training as a lawyer in order to be able to do this work?
Many and varied. The first of which is that, right? Seeing risk everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't change the world if you see risk everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't even try, right?
Yeah.
So you have to turn down that part of your brain. And there's actually research that shows that lawyers make bad founders, statistically speaking, because of that characteristic. So it's something that me and Tom, particularly Kirill, our CTO and co-founder, wasn't a lawyer, so he didn't have that problem. But me and Tom have really had to actively try and turn that down. I think it's advantageous because we understand the market, we understand the work that we're doing in many ways, but that's been really critical. I think the other piece is, and I don't know whether this is like a skill I learned necessarily, but it's more a habit of thought or of the way that I live my life. And it was very much that fear of failure. I think for lawyers, reputation is everything. And the other side of that coin is the greatest fear is embarrassment. And the greatest embarrassment is making a mistake.
Or failure.
That's exactly right. And I've had to get rid of that because, I mean, on that measure, I fail every day.
What are some of the tools you use to get around that? Is it self-talk? Is that the main thing? Or is it meditation? I'm curious to know how you work on that because that's a really tricky one. Like you say, that is something you needed to work on to do something as bold and as sassy as, start your own company.
Such a good question. It has been, you have to look after yourself so much more than I did when I was a lawyer because I just find it so much more challenging. Not just the hours and things like that, but like you're constantly putting yourself out there and leading an entire company and, whatever else. Yeah, some of it's super basic and fitter than I've ever been. I do yoga every morning. I do meditation every morning. If I don't, the wheels come off. So I'm very, very careful about that. I can see how, the San Francisco, Silicon Valley tech world gets into all that stuff. But the bigger piece really has been, it took a lot of work working with a coach, even to realize that that stuff didn't matter and that what I was holding onto was the wrong stuff and replacing that all of that sort of ego and prestige that I was seeking, replacing that with the stuff that actually mattered to me, which was adventure and doing something and striving. And, I would literally write these things down at the beginning of each year and look at those things. And I actually remember the moment where it flipped. I heard about early days. I heard about some lawyers from a big law firm in Australia, like laughing about me and the product. Someone told me, they're like, I mentioned the name Josef, and someone laughed, and they're like, oh, those guys or something. It was water for ducks back. I was like, oh my God, like whatever. And the reason why I felt that was because in that moment, this penny dropped for me, and it's so much less embarrassing to strive than it is to stay in your lane because you're scared. And I had this profound empathy for those people who thought that it was the flip side, right? That it was so much more embarrassing to strive than it was to stay in your lane. And I don't know how I got there. That happened over years, but it was that work and looking after myself. But that was a really important moment for me. My friend shared with me recently, Dante's Inferno. Dante invented one of the levels of hell for it's not people who don't strive, but it was for people who don't get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
Don't get out of their comfort zone.
There is that. And there is a famous quote, and I think I've tried to remember it. I should have it written down because I think it's Brene Brown uses it a lot. And I'm pretty sure it's Teddy Roosevelt's line, but I could be wrong, about it's the people who get into the ring, basically, are the ones who deserve our applause, not the ones who sit on the sidelines. And
Same.
so and I think it's from her Bravery book. I'll find it and put it in the show notes because this is the second time I've tried to quote it and mangled it. But it's exactly that process. It's that the whole point of living is to do something bold. And if we get put off by the people who are just not doing it, but criticizing, that's so powerful, what you're saying.
Yeah.
And what an incredible moment, right? Because that's what so many people fear. And then to have that happen and then to realize that you've kind of moved past that must have been a very, very powerful moment.
Yeah.
Very empowering indeed. Yeah.
Sam, you were talking before about how actually it's, more difficult to be a founder or to be running a business than it is to be a lawyer. I'd love to know more about that. But also I'd just love to know, do you like it? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Are you happy that you've made this transition?
I love my life so much. I am so lucky I get to do this. I heard it was a quote from someone on a podcast the other day. It was the Ezra Klein show. I can't remember who he was interviewing, or maybe The Daily. But the person being interviewed said, never bored, always tired. That's my motto.
Right.
And I thought that was a good quote. Very much describes my life over the last few years. Look, is it harder? That's a really interesting question because I said that, and as I was saying it, I was like, that's not quite right. It's not harder. I probably exert myself more than I did when I was a lawyer, but what makes it easier, people talk about burnout, right? And they always equate burnout to, I've worked too many hours. That's a load of BS. You've worked the wrong kind of hours on the wrong kind of work, and it's burned you out because your soul's, burnt out, right? I got burnt out when I was a lawyer. I didn't get burnt out because I was doing too many hours. I got burnt out because I was doing diligence and clicking a button for 16 hours a day for 3 months. That's why I got burnt out. Now I work more than that, but because it's on stuff that I love and I get to be creative and whatever else, I don't even, I can just keep going.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point because I was burnt out and I was working a lot of hours, but I was definitely not doing enough of the things that filled my cup in other ways. So I think it's about balance. I think also I saw a thing the other day talking about burnout and it's sort of equating it to, how many tabs you've got open in your head as well. And I think that's a thing as well, is when you've just got too much of a load in terms of, many, many things that you've got going on. I certainly think that fed into it for me.
Sam, you've stepped out of the traditional profession. Was it difficult to shift your identity from being a lawyer, or was it just a natural kind of evolution?
It felt very natural to me. And it felt natural to me because I was already moving into things that I loved, other things that I loved, right? I wasn't leaving the law and then sitting there thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? While I was in the law, I was starting to dip my toe, and then I stepped into a few years of exploration, in creative writing and whatever else. And so I think the lesson looking back, or I think the step that I took, which was the right one, was always be moving forward with confidence, and you won't lose yourself.
It's great advice. And I was going to ask a question now about, because I think at the beginning you said, thanks for doing Outlaws, and I needed this podcast when I was studying law. I mean, tell me why you said that. And I guess, what it is that you think that law students should know now, or in fact, any students really of any profession where they're in it and they're wondering if they want to do it and if there are other options, because there are so many career options now. We had someone on a few weeks ago who's now a legal content creator. I mean, that's not even a thing that you would imagine, would be a career that you would be able to have once you've done a law degree. So I think the world is opening up in terms of what the options are for law students, but all sorts of students now. Tell us why you think you needed Outlaws when you were at law school and what your advice to law students would be.
Because I remember being in third year, I think is when you start talking about clerkships. And I remember all the law firms put on their little shows, and they come in and there's like food and they're dressed in fancy clothes and all this kind of stuff. And I was really proud.
Seductive, right?
Literally, right?
It's like, step into this web. It's lovely in here.
That's exactly the feeling. And I'm someone who can get very wowed by the bright lights. Like, I'm excitable, as you can probably tell. I was a country boy. I didn't really know the legal world. And I do have a vague recollection that people were saying, professors particularly were saying, think about other stuff as well. You don't just have to go to a commercial firm. But there was nothing followed that. Nothing said, oh, wait and talk to these people, or here's a list of 20 other things you could be doing.
Right.
Or here's a resource where you can go and listen to them.
Right. It's marketing budget to some extent though too, isn't it? Like the big firms have the money to advertise, and I think there are so many other options, but they're not coming to the careers fairs all the time. They're just existing and doing their thing, whereas I think it's what you see, right? I do think, as I said, from having taught for so long, I think there's a lot of students who go into law not necessarily wanting that path, but then that's the path that presents itself. Everyone else is kind of doing it, or not everyone else, but that's what it seems to be. And there's a lot of people, going that direction. You can see that really clearly. And it is really hard to go against the grain at that point, when you don't know, what's out there, right?
Absolutely. You feel like you're in a funnel. And I don't regret that I did it, but for people who it's not right for, or people who have a vision, or people who want to do something else, you waste a lot of time. If you go into the little world thinking, I should just do the next thing because I got my law degree, that did play out of my head quite a lot.
So what would your advice be then to those students? They're in it, they're thinking, I don't know if I even, want to be a lawyer, or again, doesn't have to be law, but, people who are at university and thinking, I don't want to do this traditional thing.
Yeah.
Or what's your advice?
Get a part-time job, or volunteer, or just do a single class in something that you care about. We have so many of the Josef team come directly from law school. They came from people who knew or were pretty sure they didn't want to go into that world of doing clerkships and whatever else, and they came straight to us. And they all started as a legal technologist. We've got legal technologists now. They help us build tools for our wonderful customers when they don't have time. They check things, they do like QA, etc., and testing. Part-time job at university, and then they got full-time gigs. We've got Ali, who's a growth lead here in North America, who's been with us for like 4 or 5 years. Henry Ho, who's now a product manager. He's been here for 6 years, I think, like almost our longest term employee. Jay, who's a customer success manager. Those are like, we've got growth, we've got customer success, we've got product. They're all studying law. So that's just the Josef story, but that happens all across the economy, all across the world. It's sitting there for the taking. You just have to look for it.
That's the great takeaway point, isn't it? It is there. If that inkling is that path is not for you, then actually just start digging around and seeing what else is out there. That's such great advice. Sam, I want to ask is if you could imagine that you're sitting across from 17-year-old Sam, what would surprise that, I was going to say that little guy, but probably not a little guy at all, that young man? Well, I've never met you in person, and I find that the one thing with getting to know people online that can surprise you when you meet them is their height. So you might be a very tall person.
Kate, do you think I'm short or do you think I'm tall?
I think of you as a tall person, but that could be because my son is Sam and he's 6'6". So I go, oh, your name is
Oh,
Sam
God.
and you're at
Oh.
least 6'4". You might be 5'7" for all I know, but in my head, I've pictured you as a very tall person.
I'm keeping it a mystery for everyone.
Yeah, it's always going to be. One day I'll find out. I'll Google Sam Flynn height ? Might not be on there. Oh, sorry, we got way off track there. Anyway, you are sitting across from a height undetermined young 17-year-old Sam. What would surprise that young man about where you are now?
How brave I am.
Mm.
And how many wrinkles I have, but how brave I am.
What a great thing to send back
Yeah,
to that 17-year-old.
like country from rural Victoria. Yeah, I don't know what I thought I was going to do in my life, but I definitely didn't think I'd be here doing this.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool.
It's very cool, very inspiring, and probably a great place to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming and chatting to us today, Sam. I've loved hearing more about Josef, and I think it's going to be so interesting for our listeners to hear more about your story, and I think it will be incredibly inspirational for people who are feeling like the fit's not just quite right for them, and just give them ideas about what other things they might be able to do.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also, to make this real for people, if there are people listening, like find me on LinkedIn, Sam Flynn at Josef, and like reach out, send me a DM. And if I don't respond first time, don't leave it there. Follow up, follow up, follow up. People are really busy. That doesn't mean they're ignoring you. It just means they get 1,000 messages a day. But I'm very happy to chat to anyone and like help brainstorm.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. But thank you so much for your openness. I just loved hearing not just about the legal stuff, but also that story you told about hearing someone going, "Pff," and realizing that actually they're the ones with the problem, not you. What an incredible moment, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So thank you again, Sam. It was a real pleasure.
It was lovely. Thank you for having me, Shayla. Thank you for having me, Kate. You were doing God's work, and I'm excited to keep listening.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time.
That was so interesting. And do you know what's so great about these conversations, Kate, is that I hear about jobs that I didn't even know existed. A legal technologist. I did not know that was a thing.
No, it's definitely a thing, right? And it's actually been a thing for quite a while. But I really liked what Sam was saying too about, okay, what habits did he have to unlearn and how he unlearned them and the things he does to make sure he can, do things well, which is look after himself. He said he's fitter than he's ever been, and then to sort of navigate having to be comfortable with risk, which is something as lawyers we're kind of trained to look for and not do. So I found so much of what Sam said really powerful, actually. So much of what he was saying was so useful, but particularly I think for law students that I do remember that feeling as well. I remember going into law school feeling like, well, I'm pretty sure that corporate thing is not for me. That doesn't really interest me. It was the 80s. It was the greed is good decade. So I feel like I got swept up, and I did end up in a commercial law firm, and surprise, did not find it meaningful in any way. Eventually ended up in community legal centres and then in teaching, which, as it turns out, has been the career love of my life. That's the role that I really love. But it's what you see. And some people genuinely want that, right? And that's also what's marketed. And then you start to think, oh, actually, okay, that's what everyone else seems to want. That seems to be where everyone's heading. If I don't know and I can't see what else to go, then I guess I should try that. If everyone's doing it, maybe there's a reason. And what do I know anyway? And I think you sort of tend to go in that path. And it's just actually realizing there are other things, but you got to dig around for them. They're not as obvious, perhaps. And that might change in the future as more and more things become available. But yeah, I think there's still that you can't be what you can't see.
Exactly. Such a great conversation from that perspective. So thank you so much to Sam for joining us.
Yes. From New York. The timing for him, it was not too bad, was it, for us?
We were up early, but that's okay. It was worth it.
Right.
So if you've enjoyed the conversation, Outlaws, drop us a message and let us know. Follow us on all of our socials. Have a great week, Kate.
You too, Shayla. Thank you so much. And thank you to Sam. That was just such a wonderful conversation. I loved it.
Yeah, same. Bye.
See ya.